My name is Steve, and during my school years, a horrifying incident occurred in our small town. December always brought a special atmosphere to our town. Colorful lights on houses, snow crunching underfoot, and the smell of baked goods wafting from open windows created a festive feeling. But behind this cozy facade, secrets often hid. Secrets people didn't speak of aloud. That Christmas week, the one I'm about to tell you about, still sends shivers down my spine. At our school, there was one boy whose name I'll never forget, Tom. He was a straight-A student, always with perfect grades and an impeccable reputation. Teachers adored him, but that didn't help him gain popularity among us, his classmates. On the contrary, his perfection annoyed us. Tom was always alone, sitting in a distant corner during lunch and burying himself in books during breaks. Everything changed just a few days before Christmas. Zach and his crew, whom we considered the coolest kids in school, decided it was time for some fun. They wanted to prank Tom. At the time, I didn't know all the details, but later everything became clear. Zach came up with a plan: lure Tom into the forest with a made-up story about a giant tree. Allegedly, every year before Christmas, they would gather beneath this tree to make wishes and solidify their bond. The story sounded so convincing that Tom, genuinely believing in their friendly gesture, agreed to join them. By the time evening came, the town was already glowing with holiday lights. Zach and his friends led Tom to the edge of the forest and, exchanging glances, invited him to follow them. They walked confidently, telling him about their magical tradition. Tom listened, enchanted by their words, eagerly anticipating the moment he would see the legendary tree. But as they reached the densest part of the forest, something changed. Zach silently raised his hand, signaling to the others. It happened in seconds. The group suddenly scattered in different directions, vanishing into the darkness. Tom was left standing there, confused, not understanding what had just happened. Zach and his friends knew the forest like the back of their hands. They confidently made their way back to the edge, laughing and joking about Tom's expression. They all believed he would find his way out too. The forest wasn't far from town, but they were wrong. The next morning, it all began. Tom didn't show up at school. At first, no one was particularly surprised, but it soon became evident that he hadn't returned home either. His parents began to panic, and within hours, they had contacted the police. The town froze. The search began immediately. Police combed through the forest, and volunteers with flashlights searched for any signs of him. The snow made it harder. Any trace disappeared quickly. It seemed as though the forest had swallowed Tom whole. Zach and his friends began acting strangely. Their confidence and laughter vanished. They avoided conversations about Tom and wouldn't meet anyone's eyes when teachers asked if they'd seen him. A few days later, the tension became unbearable, and one of them broke down and confessed. When the truth came out, it was hard to accept. Zach admitted that it was just a prank, that no one meant to harm Tom, but their excuses didn't matter. Tom was searched for weeks. The forest was scoured over and over again, but no trace of him was ever found. The snow had erased everything, and if Tom truly got lost, finding him became nearly impossible. In the end, the search was called off. Heartbroken, Tom's parents left the town. Zach and his friends faced the court, but since they were minors and no physical evidence was found, they were sentenced to community service. Yet this verdict brought no solace to anyone. I often think about that night, about how Tom stood in the darkness, surrounded by trees, as snow covered his path back. Maybe he tried to find his way, calling for help, but no one heard him. Or perhaps he simply sat down and waited, hoping someone would come for him. Now, every December, when I walk past that forest, a chill runs down my spine. I imagine him looking up at the stars through the bare branches, hoping for rescue. But no one came. The Christmas prank turned into a nightmare. No one ever saw Tom again, but his story lives on in all of us. My name is Alex, and this incident happened to me last Christmas. Even now, whenever I think about it, a chill runs down my spine. Christmas in our family was always a quiet celebration. We would gather at my parents' house, enjoy traditional meals, and exchange gifts. That evening, I stayed late at their place. Conversations at the table went on for hours, and afterward, we all watched an old Christmas movie together. I didn't even notice how it had gotten close to midnight. I was returning home by taxi. The streets were silent and frosty, completely deserted. Snow fell in the glow of my headlights, covering everything around me with a thin layer of white. It felt like the city was completely at peace. When I arrived at my house, something immediately seemed off. The door on the porch was ajar. I distinctly remembered locking it when I left. My first thought was that maybe a draft had caused it to open, but then I noticed the lock had been broken. A sinking feeling formed in my chest. I might have been wrong, but doubts were growing stronger by the second. At first, I thought about calling the police, but then I decided to check it out myself, just in case it was nothing serious. As I got closer, I peeked inside. Everything seemed quiet. The string lights on the Christmas tree cast a soft glow over the living room, exactly as I had left them. Yet there was a strange tension in the air. I stepped inside cautiously. The floorboards creaked under my steps, betraying me. The hallway appeared untouched, but the living room was in complete disarray. Couch cushions were scattered on the floor, the coffee table was overturned, and a drawer with documents had been pulled out, papers strewn everywhere. I stood there trying to comprehend what was happening. Then I heard a noise. A faint rustling sound came from the kitchen. My heart started to pound faster. I was overcome with a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Quietly, I moved forward, doing my best not to make a sound. The kitchen was dark, dimly lit by the glow from the living room. In that faint light, I saw someone. He was dressed in dark clothing, his face hidden under a hood. He was rummaging through the drawers near the sink. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My first instinct was to turn around and run out of the house, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. I managed to take a step back, but the creak of the floorboards betrayed me again. The man spun around abruptly. When I saw his eyes, there was something wild and unnatural in them. He looked disheveled, his hands trembling as if from nerves or fear. I realized he wasn't in his right mind. I didn't have time to speak or react. He lunged at me. The force of the impact knocked me backward, and I fell to the floor. He was breathing heavily, his movements erratic, his strength far exceeding mine. For a moment, I felt his hands gripping the collar of my jacket. I tried to fight back, but I was no match for him. Then, as if realizing he was losing control, he suddenly let go of me and jumped to his feet. I could hear his footsteps retreating down the hallway. He ran out the same door he had broken into. I remained on the floor, struggling to catch my breath. For several minutes, I just sat there in silence. My heart was racing, and my mind was filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. Gathering my strength, I got up and immediately called the police. They arrived fairly quickly, considering it was a holiday night. They inspected the house and took down everything I told them. They explained that incidents like this weren't uncommon during Christmas. People often hope to find valuables like cash, jewelry, or gifts in homes. The next morning, I carefully checked all the rooms. Thankfully, the intruder hadn't managed to take anything of significant value. The only reminders of that night were the mess in the living room and the broken door. Even though much time has passed, I still can't forget the look in his eyes. That incident made me reevaluate what I thought was safe. Christmas no longer feels like a time of pure serenity and comfort to me. Now it serves as a reminder of how quickly everything can change. My name is Mark, and every Christmas I try to make gifts for my family truly special. A few years ago, an incident occurred that still makes me wonder just how far one can go for the perfect gift. My younger brother Dan has always been passionate about technology. At 25, he had already become a true expert in cybersecurity, working as an IT specialist, and often talking about complex devices I had never even heard of. Before the holidays, he casually mentioned that he had long dreamed of owning a rare gadget capable of intercepting radio signals, something like a device for testing security systems. Dan spoke about it with such enthusiasm that I decided this gift had to be his. I first tried to find the device in regular electronics stores, without success. Then I started searching for it online, but as it turned out, the gadget was not available for sale. I even left a request on a forum, but no one responded. My last hope was a small computer hardware store in the city center. The sellers there were true geeks, tech enthusiasts who knew everything about the latest developments. I visited the store in the evening, and the air smelled of cheap coffee and soldered circuits. When I described the device, the seller, a guy with thick hair and glasses, paused to think. Then he wrote down a phone number and a name on a scrap of paper. Ray. According to him, this person might be able to help me. I was a bit hesitant. Buying something from a stranger, especially so close to the holidays, seemed risky. But in my mind, I kept hearing Dan's voice, talking about how much he dreamed of such a device. I decided to take the risk. When I called the number, I heard a gruff voice. Ray confirmed that he had the device and invited me to come over. His house was outside the city, in an area I had never visited before. Everything about it seemed less than reassuring, but by that point, it was too late to back out. I arrived at sunset. Ray's house was old, with peeling paint on the walls and dim windows. Snow covered the ground, and a small, faintly glowing string of lights hung above the porch. Compared to the other houses on the street, it looked like something out of another time. I was slightly disheartened to see that this was where Ray lived. Ray greeted me at the door. He was a man in his 40s with an unshaven face and a heavy gaze. He invited me inside. The atmosphere of the house was strange. Dim lighting, a chemical smell mixed with something slightly burnt. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust, and the furniture looked as though it hadn't been moved in years. Ray asked me to wait in the hallway while he fetched the device. I nodded and stayed put, though every instinct inside me was telling me to leave. The house was eerily quiet, except for faint sounds coming from somewhere deeper inside. At first, I thought it might be old equipment or creaking floorboards, but the noise sounded more like whispering or a muffled voice. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just an old geek's house, full of quirks. However, things grew worse when I noticed dark stains on the walls, resembling dried paint, and deep scratches on the door to the adjacent room. Something was clearly off about this house. When Ray finally returned, he was holding a small box. It was the device wrapped in cloth. He said it was fully functional and asked for cash payment. I didn't haggle, handed him the money, took the box, and headed for the door. But just as I was about to open it, I heard that strange whispering again. This time it was coming from behind the scratched door. I felt like someone or something was there. Maybe an animal or a person? I didn't stick around to find out. Thanking Ray, I quickly left the house, got into my car, and drove away. A growing sense of unease creeping over me. When I got home, I realized I had left that house so quickly that I hadn't even opened the box. The device seemed to be in good condition, and according to its specifications, it was indeed the gadget my brother had been dreaming of. I placed it on a shelf, deciding to gift it on Christmas. However, thoughts about Ray's house wouldn't leave me. I kept wondering, what was happening behind that door? What were those sounds? And why was there such a strange smell in the house? Maybe I had stumbled upon something illegal. Perhaps I should have called the police right away, but the pre-Christmas rush consumed me. I just wanted to finish with the gifts and forget about it. Christmas went by peacefully. Dan was thrilled with the gift. I cleaned it up to remove any signs of use before giving it to him. He didn't even ask how I got it, but I still think about that strange evening. Sometimes I feel like I could have prevented something bad if I had called the police, but now I'll never know.